I want to welcome you to unleash the power of your soul's yearning and embark on the future filled with boundless possibilities. Your path to greatness awaits you. What is the yearning? What is our soul's yearning and where does it come from and how do we find it? How do we know what a yearning truly is? We've been taught all sorts of things about goals, positive mindsets, but does it really address what our soul is here to do? Hello, my name is Carol Wozniak, and I am the CEO and creator of the Doula Family Legacy family business. We have a midwifery and doula practice since 1980. Sadly, in October of 21, my daughter, the midwife of our practice, passed away. And we served over 4,000 families, delivered 1,200 babies. We had an unwed mom's ministry in our home for 20 years. We're the host of the largest birthing community on LinkedIn for midwives, doulas, OBGYNs, and other practitioners. I'd like to welcome you to today's training, our masterclass. The most important part of who you are and why you're here is in your story, your experiences, your yearnings. We all have yearnings, but they've not been identified until today. These yearnings are so important. They give you directions of where you want to go, what you want to do, what's important to you. Whether we're aware of them or not, we will act out our yearnings, our yearning to be seen or to be heard, to be understood. They begin the moment you arrive on planet Earth. So I'm going to share my story. This is me at 8 years old. I look pretty happy. I'm doing my homework. It becomes the last day of school. It's a beautiful June breezy day. The weather is nice. And we start to get our report cards. So one student after another is called to the front of the class. And we clap and we celebrate each person as they get their report card and they're transitioning from 3rd grade to 4th grade. The teacher called me up. I was in the last of the line because my last name started with an R. And this time she asked me to stand up in front of the classroom and to face them. And as I did, I saw their smiles turn to concern and frowns. I got this chill up the back of my spine. And I looked at my fellow students and they were kind of physically frozen in place. I looked up slightly at my teacher, Miss Cherry, and I see her angry face and then her very pointy finger. And as she points her fingers at the children, she bellows out, "You are never to talk to Carol again. She has no business being here. She's to leave the building immediately." I felt the rush of redness and blood running up to my face. I was confused. I didn't understand what was going on. Her sternness and her whole posture sent shivers down my spine as I hung my head and I walked to my desk and beyond, out the back door and out the back side door of the school. The parking lot was empty. There was no one out there. There weren't any adults or other fellow children. And I started to go home. There was 2 places where there should have been adult crossing guards, and there were none. They were the busy streets. And I lived a mile away. And upon arriving home, my mother knew something was desperately wrong. And I told her what had happened, and she was livid. I went to my room to console myself, and my world completely changed. At that moment, I knew I wasn't loved, wanted, or valued, that I had been shamed and shunned publicly, that it was time for me to isolate, because the fellow students have all been told they can't talk to me ever again. So my world just came crashing down, and I cried. My mother is the one who decided that that school and that teacher was not the place for me to be attending. It was a public school, and this teacher had decided on her own to be very cruel. There was no point to that. So when the next school year began, just before that, my mother took me to different schools. They were private schools, one in Downers Grove and one in Evanston, and had me tested. Of course, my self-confidence was at the bottom of all bottoms. I didn't think I could pass any entrance exam, especially for a private school. And I was shocked to find out that I had passed the exams for both schools. And I thought, well, what was different? How come I could pass the test for those schools and I was kicked out of my own? Well, lo and behold, my mother and father decided for me to go up to Evanston. My father, the 4th largest contractor in Chicago, was building a school, the science building at the Northwestern University, which was just a few blocks down from the elementary feeder school that I was going to. And my mother would drive me back and forth along with my little brother every day. So it was like a 35-minute to 40-minute drive one way. And my mother became a volunteer at a local adoption agency. And what her role was to pick up the newborn babies at the hospital and then bring them over to our home. And my mother would care for them for a few days until the nurse would come to pick them up for their forever home. Each of these babies, my mother just loved. She loved them. She just poured all over them. One day, I got out of school early, and my mother got a call that there was a baby ready to be picked up. And so we went to the hospital to pick up this baby. When this baby was being brought out of the nursery, there was a nurse who was treating it very, very abruptly. Her whole demeanor was anger, and she was being very aggressive with this baby. He had a piece of tape on his back with a number on it, and she ripped it off. And when she did, the baby started to bleed and screamed with pain. My mother was livid. She ripped the nurse up one side of the table to the other. She talked to her supervisors. She cared for this baby. She grabbed the baby. And we left the hospital. When do we learn that we are loved, wanted, and valued? The moment of our birth. This mother would have never given up her baby if she had known that that was the way he was going to be treated within the first few hours of his birth. This baby back at that time, there weren't any car seats. And so I was carrying the baby in my arms in the front seat as we were driving home. And the baby didn't have any life force, energy, or sparkle in his eyes. They were dull and lifeless. And you could tell that this baby did not feel loved, wanted, or valued. That resonated with me from my own experience from the class that I just left, my third grade teacher, and the way in which I was treated. And here this little one, not even 24 hours old, was experiencing that same kind of rejection. I thought to myself in my little mind, at some point, I'm going to do something. I don't know what, I don't know where, I don't know how. But the baby was never the problem. It's what people thought about the baby. So when or where have you felt or thought that you weren't loved, wanted, and valued, or seen or heard or understood, or that you made a difference? What is your story? Have you noticed, whether it's in a relationship with your family members or a coworker or your boss or a client, where you thought you hit the mark? For some reason, you thought you communicated so well that they completely felt your intention. Think about this. In the birth world, this is really important. This has been something that I teach my Doulas students and I give to my clients. There is a list of yearnings. I have over 50 some yearnings on the list, because I don't want to guess at what was important to them. So I give my clients and pretty much anyone who's interacting with me this list. There's 2 pages. I want to really meet their yearnings. So I ask them to pick out 3 yearnings. In my situation, it might be with a laboring mom, and also for my students. What are the 3 most important yearnings for this experience? To be safe, to be secure, to connect, to bond, to trust, to satisfaction? What about to love and to care for, respond to others, or nurture, to love? What about to relate, to see or be seen, to know or be known, to connect, to be known and understood, to see or hear or know others, to feel felt or to empathize, to have my existence appreciated? How many times have we had that yearning for ourselves and it didn't happen? Or what about to be loved or to love, to be affirmed, appreciated, to be cared for, to be respected, to express my existence, a sense of self and my potential, to express fully, to learn, grow, and develop, to be separate and have an identity, to create, to influence or excel, to fulfill my potential, to have a sense of mattering, to matter, to be valued or to value, to contribute, to do what I came here on earth to do, to make a difference, to please God, to fulfill our purpose, unfold my destiny, to be remembered, to leave a legacy, to leave the world a better place for being here on earth. Or what about to exchange and be connected with others, to belong, to connect, to matter, to be close, to communicate with others, to communicate with, to commune with others, to make a deep contact with another, to be intimate, to be connected to something greater than ourselves, to be connected to something bigger than myself, to feel connected to greater whole, to be one with all, to know God and the Creator, for union for all, to know thyself. Finding our 3 top yearnings and checking them off means that we then know what our anchor point is. If, for example, we have a client and we don't know one of her first yearnings is to feel safe and secure, and yet someone else is presenting different ideas, that threatens that in her mind. Will she feel safe with you if you're the one making that suggestion that's beyond her boundaries? What about being seen or heard, and yet she's just unvalidated by the practitioners or the care providers, and don't give her a say in the type of care she's getting before, during, or after delivery? Look to see how you can meet your own yearnings. When we know this list, we can say, for example, I want to be seen and I want to be heard. What can I do to take that responsibility to meet my own yearning, to be seen and to be heard? Maybe it was to call a friend or to write a letter. That is something that you can do to meet your own yearnings. What would it feel like or look like and walk in life knowing your soul's yearnings are being met? How would that make you feel? Every day, you have the opportunity to experience the deepest core yearnings and to meet them and fulfill them. If you had a child who had known these yearnings, when you had children, would your experience have been different growing up? If you understood and someone communicated to you, honey, I understand you want to be seen and heard, would that have made a difference for you? Are you willing to meet your own yearnings, to learn these yearnings, and possibly add some of your own if they're not listed here? These yearnings, when you look at a client or your children, they might be acting out to be seen, to be heard, to be understood. How would a 2-year-old act that out? Sometimes, how will an adult act that out? How would they act out the desire, the yearning to matter, to be connected to something bigger than themselves? What actions would that yearning show up with? One of the things with having an unwed mom's ministry in our home for over all those years, the biggest button that gets hit for unwed mothers is that their yearning to be loved, wanted, and valued gets hit. It's such a subliminal and subconscious experience. That yearning is so deep to the core of us. When that yearning gets hit, they feel safe enough to be vulnerable. And lo and behold, they're surprised when they find out that they're expecting. In our home, we've had multiple unwed moms come. But the first one, when I became a certified childbirth educator and doula, the very first mom that showed up at my class, she was a nursing student. She was working full time, and she got pregnant. Wasn't intending to get pregnant, but she got pregnant. And it turned out that her mom kicked her out. And the dad turned out to be married, and she didn't know that. So here she was, homeless, shamed, rejected, and no place to go. So we opened up our home, and we opened up our doors, and we gave her one of the bedrooms, and she lived with us. It was the last day of school for the Christmas break, and she went into labor that day. So we started doing labor management here at the house, but it soon became apparent that there was a malpresentation and she needed to be transferred for a C-section. So she had her C-section. She came home 3 days later, but 10 days after baby, she was going back to school and back to work. She did not want to lose her scholarship, nor could she afford to lose her job at the nursing home where she was working. So here she was, a single mom with a newborn, post C-section. She wasn't even released to go back. But in her mind, she had to go back. So we ended up taking care of this newborn baby girl on top of everything else. Well, that young lady now is in her 40s. She's highly successful. The mom did get her nursing degree. And she did become the director of this nursing home where she was working. Ultimately, it worked out. There were other two moms, and all the babies went and were with their moms, except for two. And those two babies that were adopted out knew their moms. And the one mother became her daughter's and her adopted sister's godmother for both of them. She was the babysitter and the travel companion with the family. The other mom had an open adoption, letters and pictures and things. So here these are. When this little baby that I shared with you earlier had such a contrasting experience right off the bat. And I thought, what could I do? The life experience that I had with this little one, understanding that life is so precious. This little baby did nothing to cause harm to anyone, but someone caused harm to it. And the way that I have taken that life lesson, not knowing it was going to be the trajectory of my whole life, pretty much my whole life. Because with my 6 daughters and 2 sons, they've all helped out at births. The women were staying here, and so my oldest, who ultimately became the midwife of the family, started doing labor support when she was 8 years old because the women were living in our house. It was normal to do labor management for laboring moms. And there was one day that this unwed mom came to my home. Her mother, who had been an unwed mother herself, was so angry, just so angry that her daughter was expecting. And she had tried taking her daughter to get an abortion 3 different times. For whatever reason, either the offices weren't open, whatever reason, this little one, they missed the window. And she was going to do a home birth, and she was going to do the home birth at our home. And so she was under midwifery care. And the day she went into labor, it was a couple weeks a little early. She could deliver. She was 37 weeks. That wasn't the issue. The issue is that my daughter and I were out of town and my other children were home. And this young lady went into labor and she kept telling her family, I've got to get to Carol's. I've got to get to Carol's. Well, they didn't believe her and they were frustrated and they were angry. Eventually, they did bring her over to our home and my 2 daughters were home. One who had just had a baby 6 months earlier and my 14-year-old. So they put her in the shower and she was having contractions in there, and then she's sitting on the toilet and she goes, "Do you feel pushy?" And she goes, "No, I don't feel pushy." So at the time, my son-in-law was filling up the tub in the front kitchen area. We had a birthing tub and they were filling that up, and they had called the midwife And she had stopped along to check on another patient because she didn't think that this laboring teen was going as quickly as she thought. Lo and behold, they got her into the tub. My daughters got her into the tub, and my younger one took the front end, and my other daughter took the back end. Needless to say, they delivered that baby successfully. But while they were doing that, the grandmother-to-be was in the kitchen praying silently that the baby would be born dead because she was so angry that her daughter was going to be a single mom. And of course, that didn't happen. My daughters got her out of the tub, got her up on the bed. The placenta delivered. The baby was nursing when the midwife walked in. This doesn't happen normally this way. It just happened to work out this way. When the grandmother was driving home, there was a puppy. It was January. There was a puppy on the Eisenhower that was coated with ice. And I remember the grandmother calling me up, sobbing and sobbing. And she said, I felt like God was talking to me, that he said, you had more compassion for this puppy than you did your own grandchild. It just broke her spirit. It broke her heart. It softened her heart. She didn't realize what her hardened heart and anger had actually done and how much damage that she had done. Well, lo and behold, here we are years later, that little grandbaby became the apple of her eye. She sent me her graduation pictures. She's a very successful young lady. It's amazing when we really have an opportunity to know that you're loved, wanted, and valued, that you're seen and heard. And we meet those yearnings. We identify those yearnings. We can see each other differently. Do you know the true yearnings of the relationships that you have, or those with your family, or your spouse, or your coworkers? Maybe your employer. Maybe if you were trying to work a sales transaction and it didn't happen because you were focused on one thing when the client is focused on another. What about when you're prospecting or you're providing customer service and you can't figure out why they don't appreciate the customer service you're providing? The challenge might be is you're not hitting the right yearnings. That happens all the time in relationships. But if we know our own yearnings and we understand the yearnings list, what transpires is that we can read people's body language. We can read their responses differently. We can observe them. So if you're, for example, a child, the child is 2 years old and acting out. And what we would think is a temper tantrum is really a way that they're communicating my yearnings are not being met, and I don't know how to tell you. But by their actions, we can see that they need to be heard or understood or be loved, to feel safe. The value of the yearnings list will change the game for any business, for any relationship, for any communication that you have. Think about your story. When or where have you felt or thought that your yearnings either weren't met or you had no clue on how to meet theirs? Your story is the most important story. That's where the lesson is, and how to meet your own yearnings. If you're interested in learning more about the yearnings and how it can play a role in your business or with your patients or clients or customers, reach out to us. Reach out to me, Carol Wachniak, at doulafamily.com.